Hello, everybody. I am Nupur, and I'm excited to welcome you all at Innovation Root Studio. And today I'm happy to have Kosuke Kawaguchi with us in this
Oh,
discussion. Hello, Kosuke. Welcome to this discussion.
hey, thanks for having me.
So today we will be discussing about his inspiration for Jenkins creation and a lot more. For the uninitiated, let me tell a little bit about Kosuke. He is a creator of Jenkins and co-CEO of Launchable. He is a well-respected developer and popular speaker at industry and Jenkins community events. So once again, a very warm welcome, Kosuke.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting.
To begin with, Kosuke, what has inspired you for the creation of Jenkins?
Sure. Yeah. So this was, I think it was around 2004. I was working for a company called Sun Microsystems. Now it's gone for like a good 10 years. So I'm kind of like a shock to see many young people don't even recognize that name. But that company was, the founder of the Java. And so I was working in a broader group that was doing this Java Enterprise Edition, which is the like application platform that I think I'd like to think it's still pretty popular. But anyhow, back then that was the thing. That was the platform for people to build the backend app on top of. So I was in a team of like a 4 developers or so, and we own this like a one component in this big system, right? And then I used to be a guy who breaks builds all the time. So, we were using ancient version control system called CVS. And, it had this thing where depending on which directory you run the commit command, like it only basically commits that directory and subtree. So, it was very easy for me to miss some. And then, so what happens is like, I check in the code that doesn't compile. And then, so next time somebody updates their workspace and they discover that, oh, it's not working, and then after I did the investigation, like I often get the phone call like, "Hey, like you touched this file the last time, and it doesn't compile. What's going on?" And I had one too many of those, and like one day it felt embarrassing. So I thought, okay, maybe I can write a program that catches that before my colleagues do. Right? The idea being like, if it's always building and running a test, and I get to know that before anybody finds out, right? So that was like about motivations. And another one was, because we were producing this platform that the other people are writing apps on top of, and I was embarrassed to say I never actually wrote a program on top of the platform that we are producing. In other words, like I wasn't doing dog food eating, so that felt not right. So I wanted to, I was always looking for something that I can actually build to exercise that muscle. So this felt like, as good as any other projects. And so that kind of led me to it. I was actually prolifically producing lots of open source projects to the point that I had this blog series called Project of the Day. So the idea is like a one open source project a day. Well, not every day, but still quite a few. So this started as one of those, but because I guess it was used at my workplace, and my colleagues kept giving me some feedbacks, and that sort of kept me going for a good long while. And then so after, I think it took like 2 or 3 years before anybody else started noticing it. But by then, there's a substantial software already written, so it really kind of picked up, and then people started talking about it, and like the rest is kind of history. I'd like to think, part of the reason it spread apart is as during this time phase, like Sun was really like going down. Like every quarter we are losing something, and people are moving away. And I'd like to think some of the people who moved away from Sun to another company kind of took these practices with them. So they went to the new workplace and said, "Hey, like I've been using this software, and that's been useful." And then they go like, "Oh, okay, this is interesting, right?" So yeah, that's sort of like how what became Jenkins came into being.
Thank you, Kosuke. That's very interesting. Have you ever thought that it will go so popular?
No, well, no, really no. But I do like to think. So this was not the first open source, like first, not even the first big open source project that I worked on. This whole four people team component that we are building. Actually, let me step back. So Sun also at around this time was trying to, really embrace open source. So there was a new CEO and his plan was basically, let's open source everything because we are not really making any money on the software anyway. And, then we'll figure something out along the way and then it's going to be good. So, which was a naive plan, really, really naive plan. But our component was chosen as like one of the first guinea pig to like really go all in on open source and kind of task to figure out, what do you need to do and whatnot. So, so from that experience, I built this hypothesis that, of course, like, just open sourcing something isn't sufficient to drive adoption or interest. But when we did this add-on system, like we built this extra layer that allows other developers to build on top of it, then like that really I felt like we got good traction. Um, so I wanted to kind of do that. I really took that lesson to my heart, and that also resonated with me as I participate to somebody else's open source project. So I wanted to kind of, replicate that at the scale. And then, so that sort of became this Jenkins plugin system. And to me, like that was really the key enabler to make this like unlock this whole wave of contributions that made the Jenkins that much more useful, which drives more users, and then that some of the users become the contributors, and there's this vicious positive feedback cycle that like kept us really going. So that was amazing experience. But if you ask me, did I see that all coming? Obviously no. Like yeah, it was a lucky, happy accident, really.
I'm sure it was an overwhelming experience for you. Yeah. Kosuke, please share your experience on open source playing a crucial role for engineers.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, my life, now that if you ask me, like, my life has been wholly entangled with open source in so many ways. So this was really like, like play a really key pivotal role for me, like let alone, the business or engineer. So, I grew up in Tokyo, in Japan, and in terms of the technical, so the software development industry, there's a sizable population and market, and therefore a sizable software industry over there. But by and large, that community is not connected with the the main software development going on in the world, which is like the US and Europe, and probably India is also somewhat part of it, right? Got all this English speaking community, with the people's network and that sort of thing. So I was very, like I didn't know that kind of thing existed over there, but it was my first open source project that I've done in the space of XML that kind of got the attention of somebody from Sun Microsystems, the man named John Bozak. He's a very old, like a wise man. He was instrumental in creating the original XML standard. So I think he had some, like a master plans about, well, these are the interesting technology and assets to acquire in the space of XML for some microsystems. And I think for whatever reason, for reasons like I think he got attention. He caught of this hobby project that I was doing, and he wanted to have me over to the to California and like I kind of work for Sun to continue on that work. So that was an amazing opportunity for me. So I was like, okay, great. Like let's do this. Like, what have I got to lose? And I was also very young too. So in that sense, the reason I was able to sort of join this global software development community was thanks to open source. And I think there's lots of pockets of, the software engineers around the world that feels similarly disconnected, right? I mean, the India is probably on the better side, but I bet like if you go to, I don't know, like a Thailand or like a Belarus or, like a South Africa or like there's all sorts of pockets in the world that's not, it's just yeah, and then there's like if you're not for worried not for the open source project, I don't think these people will ever be connected. So that I think is still like a key role that the open source continues to play to kind of help the individuals, play at the world stage. And I'm truly thankful for that. And then beyond that, like after I joined Sun, I was at Sun for close to 10 years. And, toward the end, what happened was, yeah, Sun didn't do very well. So like Oracle acquired Sun, and then so on and so forth. So that was around the time. Um, so I did, I think I remember doing like a one or two interviews with another company during that time period to see, like if there are some opportunities out there. And, like in many ways, that I had so many open source projects that I've done kind of made it really easy for other people to see what I bring to the table, right? Because what happens is like, if you're working on some company's internal systems, um, like now that especially I'm on the hiring side, I can see like it's difficult to really get the picture of like how good this guy or this person is. Now, if you can see what they are writing, it's a wholly different story, right? Like the engineers, especially if you're trying to judge how good a software the other people produce, I can learn a whole lot by just looking at the code they produced. So open source is like uniquely positioned. In that sense, I think it kind of helps engineers be more, I guess, the marketable. And that kind of like a too commercially award, but it lets you carry your reputations and your work to another company. Um, and then in my case, like not only that, I was eventually able to sort of create a company. Well, I mean, I called CloudBees, and that there I was able to take the software open source projects that I created into like a more serious force in the field. So that obviously wouldn't have happened if this wasn't open source, right? It would have been looked as a Sun's internal project. So that was amazing, like incredible opportunity. So just in so many ways, even though the role of open source has been changing, it's just yeah, it's just such an incredible vehicle for engineers. And then since I started talking about this, if I may, like I go a little bit further, um, it's also at the personal level, like gave me incredible satisfactions, right? Like, you know, I think that one of the reasons we all, well, I guess maybe it's probably not just software engineers, but we all do what we do is because we want to make some people happy, right? Like, and then most of the time in the software engineering field, we don't really get to see our customers firsthand. So, we hope, well, we hear from salespeople or some such that, okay, our software is making an impact. Or maybe if you work with somebody like Google and then you're on the bus and like you see some other people Googling on their phone and you feel like, okay, that is enabled by partly what I'm doing. That's a great feeling. But most of us don't really get to enjoy that or that often. Open source is different. Like you get to interact with your quote unquote the customers, users directly. And then I think then, they come up and thank you. And I mean, some people would say nasty things as always, but by and large, like they appreciate what you're doing. And I think that's just a great feeling. I remember one time going to a local library, and like there comes a guy walking toward me. He's wearing a Jenkins T-shirt, and I was wondering, should I say something or not? I didn't, but that just seeing that was amazing feeling. So I think that gave me a lot in terms of gratifications. Also all these people around the world, right? The reason I'm talking to you is because like you find out about me through, my work in open source. So, and that's, and that's true anywhere I go in the world. I can now talk to people, and some of them are contributors, some of them are users, and they took me into like a local restaurant and a bar, and I might not even understand what they are saying, but it's incredible. It's like it's yeah. So it's been one amazing experience that I feel very humbled. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. So, as you've mentioned about the role changing as well, so my next question is what kind of changes you have witnessed in open source in the last 20 years?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think the so when I started the project, obviously I was the sole and the only contributor. So my main job was basically to write code. Um, but as the project gets bigger, it sort of starts to change. Like it becomes, my job becomes more on the writing a platform. So I mentioned about this plugin add-on ecosystem, and building that takes actually a good amount of engineering work and non-engineering work. So that became the thing that I do spend more time on. So like, it and at some point I noticed, oh, I'm actually not writing a CI system anymore. Like I'm writing this platform that allows other people to develop the CI system. And that's a kind of like a change on its own. And then, the more and more as the project gets bigger, like, your role keeps changing, in the sense that, like what happens is there's only one me and there's something that only founder can do. I mean, that's maybe it's the same thing with the CEO, right? Like, there's only something you can do. Yeah, you can do other things as well, but those are like replaceable by other contributors. Then, as the project gets bigger or the company gets bigger, you get to do less of the things that other people can take on, and then you only do what uniquely you can do. So what that does is like it sort of, and then because the product is going through the hyper growth, the same with startup, like your role keeps changing. And then you kind of get pushed into doing things that you don't necessarily feel competent or comfortable with. So, I'm not I guess, I'm more of a, like, how do I put this? So some people are like really over optimistic slash overconfident, right? Like they feel like they can take on anything. And I'm probably like on the opposite side of this. Now, when it comes to writing code, by that point I've done enough of those, and I feel confident that I'm a capable developer. So in some sense, like you derive your personal pride from doing things that you feel good at. So to kind of needing to let loose of that and sort of like accept the fact that you're ever, from now on, forever, you're going to be asked to do things that's new to you. And just when you start to get the hang of it, then that sort of moves away from you, and like yet another thing's coming. That I think is maybe like a biggest change, in my role. So yeah, I like to think I did yeah, like you need a different ways of building like a self-esteem and confidence in that. Like, because you're not gonna be knocking everything out of the park. So it's more. I became more interested in like a focus on getting better as opposed to being good. And then so that really helped me. And so it's. I don't know if this is making sense, but uh, that's
It surely helps, Kohsuke. Generally, people know you as a successful developer or a creator of Jenkins, but you would have seen challenges in your career as well. So,
yeah.
what is the most challenging situation that you have faced in your career, and how did you sail through those challenges?
Yeah, so I guess I describe this like a ever shifting responsibility as probably like a biggest challenge. So how do or actually maybe like one particularly stressful episode is around when the Hudson had to be renamed to Jenkins. There was a really more of like a direct confrontational situation, and that's something new that I had to handle. Like also pretty high stake and stressful. Um, so yeah, it was, I guess, I was able to kind of get through because I had other people around me who I felt like got my back, people in the project that I knew for the longest time. And then so, yeah, so being able to kind of lean back on other people has been really helpful. Now I feel like it, I also now feel, I think back then I was also feeling like you can, so given a choice, like you have a choice, like you can do X or Y or Z. And often like my mindset was more like, okay, I gotta have to make the right choice or else like it's gonna be bad. Um, and that's, I think it's nowadays I feel less like that and more like, I think no matter which way you choose, it's gonna be okay and fine, just like a different outcome. So the it's less about we are forced to make the right call or like things to break apart. You can choose either of those and it will turn out okay, just differently. So that makes I think takes a lot of stress away. Um, and so just in many ways, I think it's just a perceptual difference in how you see things. It really helped me kind of go through those challenging, what I felt like a challenge. So um, yeah, so that was, I think, that kind of mindset change, partly, inspired by again talking to other people, and so I don't know. I think that's probably most important shift in me that happened. Um, and then the other is like a growth, I guess the growth mindset that I mentioned, like trying to get joy out of being better. Like second time you do this, you're a little better than before, and or learning something new, like feeling that as a fun. That's something I got to experience a lot in the startup. Right? Like at Sun, it's a huge, 1,000 people organizations. All people around me were engineers. So then in those places, like your vision kind of you get the tunnel vision, like you see the career progression as an engineer, and kind of that's it. Um, in startup, like I had at one point the first office we got in Los Altos, California. We had 4 people working in there. I was the only engineer, and other people are from different job professions, like a salespeople, marketing, and so on. So when you work with these other people, you get to really see like what they bring, like that you get the experience. They are professionals just as you are in different, just in the different domains. And then so, like okay, sales, like back then I had zero appreciation. Like I guess I don't know, you do something to like get the signature on the purchase order, I guess. Right? And then you get to see them in action, and you understand like how they try to like build a mental frame, and like how they describe what they do and what and then so that intentionality behind how they do things, and observing that was amazing. And like I got a lot of joy out of seeing them up close. So yeah, so that I think is also was really helpful in building a different kind of perspective at it. So, yeah, so in some sense, I guess maybe I describe the whole thing broadly as a value of the diversity, right? Like it's if you are only surrounded by people like you, then your vision gets smaller. And then this job profession is one, but if you have a different views, it's really inspiring. And maybe you can describe the success of Jenkins in a similar way, right? If I felt like I knew all the right answer to build a great CI system, then I wouldn't need this, like the plugin system, right? I just need a lot of coders who do what I tell them to do. Whereas, it turns out that in the software development industry, we do things very, very differently from different pockets of industries. Like people writing web services behave very differently from people writing financial institution systems. And so what's the right answer depends on where in the world you're using it. And so when you can allow other people to, build their CI system on top of this platform, you're kind of giving, they bring their perspective and they make the whole thing better. So I also consider that to be a value of the diversity. And so yeah, so I guess maybe that's kind of, I'm probably going around in tangent, but that's something very close to my heart.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences, Kohsuke. So today we see DevOps is a much talked about thing in the industry. What is so exciting in DevOps for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going on for what at this point, 10, 15, like a really long. So, one thing I'm very interested right now is the studies, how to use data more effectively. So let me kind of back up a little. Um, so for longest time, I think our focus in DevOps was really to automate. At least that's where I was focused on. Like there are lots of activities that surrounding, code software development, and then we are trying to automate that so that we the developers can pack more punch by the help of lots of automations, right? And then so I see CI systems like Jenkins as being kind of playing a crucial role in there, but there's also automation in deployment, testing. There's all sorts of areas that we collectively been pushing for the past also many decades, right? Now when I sort of like a step back and look at all these automations, and now there's so much automation to the point like most of us don't even keep track of, right? It's something for most developers, it's something that happens in places they don't see. Now all these automations are producing lots of data, um, but by and large, we are not using those data that comes out from these systems effectively. I think in many places, let's say all the output that comes from a testing system is essentially boiled down to one bit of information, which is did everything pass or fail? And then if something failed, then you're not allowed to merge this change, right? So that's a useful thing to do, but it's incredible, feel like a wasted opportunity because everywhere else in the world, you're saying, okay, the data, like big data, is what's gonna disrupt the business as usual, right? And then we can easily see as a developer, okay, like if you can understand people's behavior, well, then we can maybe push them a better ad, or like it's that so on so on and so forth. Um, but we are not using those data in our own software development field to make ourselves better, which I think is a shame. Somehow I feel like too many of us seems to think that we are not going to get disrupted. We are the ones that are disrupting other people, but we are not going to get disrupted. And I think we are wrong. Um, so, that's kind of things that I started interested in. And then that led to eventually my current company, Launchable. So the first problem that we are tackling is, okay, like, you have, Mr. Architect, you have a project that's been successful for 10 years. You have amassed, tens of thousands of test cases, many of which has been written by people who are no longer with the company. You don't even really know what they are testing for, but you kind of carry them around anyhow because, like a quality is important, right? But what often happens is like the volume of tests is going to only go up, and then so that starts to slow down the software development. And I've seen that, in many places. Um, but as a developer, I also know that not all these tests are equally useful. Like if I'm talking about a large system and I'm making just a small changes over there, they really need to run all the tests that covers the entire thing. It's probably not. Right? We just can't tell like which ones are more useful. So that seems like something like a data should be able to tell. Or like another very common problem is called flaky tests, right? The tests randomly passing and failing. It's really annoying. I think every developer has some experience facing with that. It's truly a universal problem. Okay, we try to reduce those, and that's important effort, but we also know that it's impossible to get rid of those, right? So now, why, like, what if we can sort of look at the past, behavior of the test to say, oh, this failure that happened this time around, I think we think it's probably just another flaky occurrences, right? So let's skip that. Well, let's ignore that. So that's another example in which, like, even some casual data analysis could reveal, right? So those are the examples of data-driven DevOps, as I call them, we can bring to the table. And that's what I'm sort of actively working on. But really, like beyond that, I think there's actually lots of different ways in which data can be used, even in a tiny ways, to add values. So, I've met with some teams who are using regular expression pattern matching over the build log. So they can guess, not tell, they can just guess that, oh, this looks like a test infrastructure problem. So I'm going to notify this to the QA engineers. Well, this looks like the application failure. So I'm going to notify the app developers. Regular expression, right? That's like duct tape that the engineer had for like half a century now at this point, and even that is like producing some like a quick value like that, in which notifying the right people at the right time is actually very very valuable, not just for efficiency but also to maintain credibility. So I think I consider that example of like, okay, let's see what we can do with this data, like to actually solve a little problem we have. And I think something like that would have a universal value. And now that we have enough data coming out of this automation, I think the time is ripe for doing that. And yeah, so that's what I'm interested in DevOps nowadays.
Yeah, that's interesting, Kosuke. So conclude. Let's conclude this discussion with an understanding of how can our industry come out of the setbacks that are caused by the coronavirus outbreak.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, you say setback. I'm like a what setback? Like I've never seen. I have never really seen any. I mean, actually, that might not be true. I mean, some business got disrupted, and then, so their priorities have changed and whatnot. But I think by and large, I think we were on the positive side of. If anything, I think the demand for software has increased. Um, and then so, we had it really lucky. I mean, I feel it that way. I've been working from home for the past year. Like, and I know that that's a luxury, like not something to be taken for granted. Um, but perhaps maybe that's also, I think it perhaps speaks to the higher responsibilities that we, the software developers, have to the world, right? I think it used to be, I think what we do is just steadily becoming more and more important for the society, running more crucial parts of things. So I think that creates like a bigger responsibility for us, like, to do the right thing, but also, build the software that functions. Um, so that's something I think we need to keep up in the game. I think the way we develop software is still crappy. Like the quality of the software we produce is like far less than ideal. Um, so we got a lot of work to do to make sure we can deliver the software that the world needs as quickly and as reliably as possible. So I'm doing my part, like a small part of it. I hope everybody else is doing their part too.
Yeah, I mean, you have said a very important thing that there's a higher responsibility over software developers
Yeah.
in these days, and it really makes sense when you say that.
Yeah, I truly feel that way. I think the world needs a lot more software written. Like I've always felt that way, but even more so now.
Yeah, thank you, Kosuke. That was an amazing discussion with you. I really enjoyed, and I'm sure the participants and the audiences of this particular discussion would enjoy what questions we have discussed and your experiences that you have shared with us. Thank you once again for being with us for this discussion, Kosuke.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and you know where to find me in the Twitter, like Kohsuke Kawaguchi. So, like, please keep me posted if you have any thoughts, questions, like challenges, suggestions. As I said, it's the interaction with other people that took me here, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you.